Gemini rising, no doubt you've heard a lot of hype and spin about the Barbault basket. This is how it looks like in a whole sign Gemini rising's chart. In this video, I want to break down all the components. I'm Sook Boy, you're awesome. Let's talk about it. Now, this aspect pattern is made up of mostly generational planets and Jupiter. That's known as a social planet. So it's not really about the individual. Now, you could be individually impacted, but it's more likely the case that you are observing this aspect pattern play out in the cultural zeitgeist, in humanity at large. And whilst we can deem this an event because the aspect pattern perfects at 4 degrees of Leo, Aquarius, Gemini, and Aries, it's actually unfolding as it goes. And it's actually part of a broader and wider cycle that already began. We're actually in the thick of it. This is a tense moment or a moment of crisis, a moment where we're asked to pivot. Again, collectively, we'll be moving through this, and you might be more observational of this frequency, this temperament, or as you want to call it, an event. It's much better to actually look at this situation like an episode or an epoch or an era we're moving through. And this is a continuation of what has already been happening. Astrology can only predict the conditions in which an event can occur. And holistically, we have to look back at events that have already started in momentum for us to understand where in the cycle we're actually sitting. To nest this in a little bit of context, around 2000, we could say that we saw a new generation birthed into the earth. And since then, they've got a very unique hot take on what their worldview is. They were probably normalized to technology. The internet, for example, they always had the internet around them. So everyone that predates around that 2000 period is going to have a very different worldview. And now, because these 20-something-year-olds have matured and they're moving well and truly into adulthood, they're actually going to attain some more influential positions in society and potentially influence society accordingly. Another moment that we can actually look back to is the global financial crisis, and that was around 2007, 2008. A lot of things started to pivot and shift in that time as well, meaning that we saw the rise of digital currency, and we also saw the government bail out corrupt bankers. But the time I want to actually start the clock for you, Gemini rising, is around 2019 to 2020, leading into that pandemic. Who were you back then? What did you start back then? How has your life changed? What skills have you acquired? What's been going on in your life? Where have you rolled the dice and started something new? What doors have closed? What doors have opened? And where do you sit within the digital revolution that we're currently moving through? Think about it. We used to have this illusion that you could do a 9-to-5 job and that would pay for everything you need. You could buy a house and have a nuclear family. And sure, whilst that is still true, and that will probably be true for some time, the workforce has splintered. And now you can have an online presence. And rather than being a slave to the power hierarchy, someone else's personal interests with a 9-to-5 job, you can actually have your personal brand, you can become an influencer, but you're still a slave to the algorithm. And that's the key here. In fact, not having some kind of presence on the internet is almost non-negotiable. You're going to have your banking app or being connected with your friends or whatever the case may be. You online is what is happening, and it's very difficult for you to operate within society without having access to it. So potentially during this event, we might see a serious acceleration across many fronts when it comes to technology, digitizing identity, digitizing ID, and basically interfacing with technology more so than ever. Now, if it doesn't happen in July, again, we'll see these events unfold at a more accelerated rate over the next 6 years. Now, for Gemini rising, you should be feeling by now an experimentation with who you really are. Your identity might be rapidly changing, Uranus in the first house. Things that once defined you no longer fit. Maybe you've changed your appearance. Maybe you've changed your wardrobe. Maybe you've changed your whole philosophy on life and the way you view your life and the way you view society. So there is a feeling of restlessness and experimentation and ruthless curiosity. And something rather unconventional is starting to emerge through how you want to express yourself and who you want to be and how you want to interface with your reality moving forward. I've spoken about this at length with Uranus moving through your first house in a prior video. Mentally, there is a thirst for having conversations with real substance, less patience for small talk and gossip, and a strong desire for more meaningful discussions. You might slowly begin to become a little bit more spontaneous within your friendship circles. Now, I've already covered Jupiter moving into your third house of Leo, and this is giving you confidence, bravery, and a very strong will when it comes to expressing what you think about and what ultimately you want to talk about and broadcast to people. But this is basically where the clash or the lid of the basket or the cradle pattern actually exists, from this Jupiter to this Pluto up in your 11th house. And this is called the knowledge axis. This is basically facts or evidence versus opinions. Think about the pride people have around their truth. Now, often if you actually confront someone on their truth, it quickly becomes them saying something like, I'm just trying to live in my truth. But the fact of the matter is they're probably just living within their opinion. And so there's this collapse or clash or conflict between someone's philosophy and the evidence of the matter. You know, the fact checkers. Who's fact checking the fact checkers, for example? And the whole idea that now people's attention is monetized, people dangle temptation in front of you with clickbait. And you waste your time reading like copious amounts of knowledge that people are very confident about, when it actually means absolutely nothing, and it's probably only been validated by AI slop. And again, the way out of this opposition, this kind of power struggle with, different clashing ideologies or political proclivities, is to move into that more experimental, curious phase of research in that first house of Gemini. Not to mention the Neptune up in your 11th house of Aries. The Neptune and the Uranus are actually the relieving components of this tense opposition between Jupiter and Pluto. Now, trines and sextiles don't necessarily mean that you get to solve the problems of the collective by any means, but they do relieve that initial charge. Think about the opposition. That's like the tension, that's the charge of the battery. And that excess energy gets to funnel into the Uranus in your first and the Neptune up there in your 11th. Now, there's not a lot of ooey gooey emotions in this for you, Gemini rising. It very much is getting your facts and your evidence in order and allowing that to be the baseline structure of how you debate or how you actually articulate ultimately your opinions, but your worldview. Use that Uranus in the first house to ask more questions, become very curious. I'm not going to lie, for Gemini rising, this is a bit of a rebel without a cause if you're not careful. It can be very rebellious, unconventional, and hard to predict. Unpredictable, what have you. For many of you, you might feel impulsive to completely change your personal style and how you present yourself. How you perceive others, how others perceive you could also be altered. Even the way you introduce yourself to people might not run on an old program. You might be stepping into a completely new era about how you identify with yourself and that first impression you leave on others. And this might actually help you or allow you to get into more fluid or open discussions with people you already know, but it might also introduce you to a completely new ocean of community. And maybe finding your tribe is what you really need to do in this moment. Something actually tells me that you and the people you hang around with and your philosophy in life and the way you think and how you communicate will feel almost unrecognizable by the time we finish this 12-year cycle. And again, think about how much has changed in your life since the start of the pandemic 6 years ago. What is your relationship with spirituality? What is your relationship with God? What is your worldview, political proclivity? All of that. What is the guiding force here? And what is the vision of the future? Pluto has taken control of your 9th house and it's burning the lies away. Some of your friends just simply don't get it. Some of them have gone completely batshit crazy. And some of them have accused you of going batshit crazy also. Using the Neptune to find spiritual sovereignty, using the Uranus to find intellectual sovereignty, and not putting communities on pedestals. Now, for some of you, because of the Pluto-Jupiter opposition, this could actually be rather close to home. This could be your local neighborhood. This could be your siblings, your neighbors, your extended family, your in-laws. There could be some clash of ideologies. And they're already happening, by the way, but they could actually be exacerbated or exaggerated in this time, especially over July. Back around the pandemic, did you play a hand in cancelling someone and now you are being cancelled, or vice versa? Or if it wasn't you, was it a sibling, extended family member, or potentially a childhood friend? Did you end up censoring yourself, not speaking the truth? Now, if you see a repeating of themes come up in this time, it's really important to not censor yourself, to actually have the courage to speak the truth. The truth just needs to have a little bit of evidence sprinkled in there, just saying. For many of you, you can right the wrongs and find your voice in this time. For some of you, this will be very successful and you'll have a very influential voice. For others, you won't be as lucky. Pluto and Jupiter clashes can go either way. Last but not least, do not suffer psychological resistance for adopting new technology, especially in the career. In fact, again, just use curiosity, excitement, and ruthless enthusiasm when it comes to adopting new ways of doing things when it comes to your career. Explore your options, expose yourself, and discover more ways of doing things in a more futuristic manner, I guess you'd say. Now, if you'd like to dive in for a personal reading, let me know. I'll send you a coupon code for $30 Australian off. Thank you so much for watching this entire video. I hope that helps. Okay, bye.